Hello, my friends. We are going to talk about A Course in Miracles. We're going to do or review workbook lesson 13. We're working our way up. There's 365 lessons. We do one a day, 365 days, or we could work with one for a longer period of time. We just don't do more than one per day. Lesson 13, just another way of reviewing what we did in lesson 12. Lesson 12 was, I am upset because I see a meaningless world. Lesson 13 says a meaningless world engenders fear. When we see a meaningless world, that it builds a sense of fear within us. Who wants to live in a meaningless world? We talked about this yesterday. However, let's dive in here and see what the workbook has to say. Today's idea is really another form of the preceding one, except that it is more specific to the emotion aroused. Actually, a meaningless world is impossible. The next lesson tells us why it's impossible, but I might allude to it in between the lines here. Nothing without meaning exists. However, it does not follow that you will not think you perceive something that has no meaning. On the contrary, you will be particularly likely to think that you do perceive it. What is being said here? That we are perceiving a world of our own creation. We are giving it all the meaning that it has for us. When we take that meaning away, we return to our original innocence. We see the true meaning, which is the meaning that God has in everything that is of his or her creation. Recognition of meaningless arouses intense anxiety in all the separated ones. And of course, there are no separated ones, but there is the illusion that we are separate. So we are the separated ones in our perception. But beyond perception, in reality, we're all one. It represents a situation in which God and the ego challenge each other, as to whose meaning is rewritten in the empty space that meaningless provides. So, that's the conflict. Ego versus God. And of course, God always wins, because the ego doesn't truly exist. And the more we return to seeing reality as it is, without the meaning that we assigned it, without the meaning of our perceptions, based upon our projection of guilt and fear, the more the ego dissipates, and we see only with the eyes of God. We see as is instead of as perceived. The ego rushes in frantically to establish its own ideas there, fearful that the void may otherwise be used to demonstrate its own impotence and unreality. Its own impotence and unreality. And this alone, it is correct. And on this alone, it is correct. Sorry, guys. So it is essential, therefore, that you learn to recognize the meaningless and accept it without fear. What we perceive is meaningless because it is not a true representation of reality itself. If you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess and crowd it with images that do not exist. To the ego, illusions are safety devices, as they must also be to you who equates yourself with the ego. That's the world we live in. And we live in a fearful world, a violent world, a world where people are allowed to starve and remain homeless, because that is the world of our projections. It's the world that we perceive. It doesn't have to be. And we'll continue with that as we work through the text, as well as the workbook. So the exercise for today, which should be done about 3 or 4 times a day. Pardon me, guys. But not for a minute or so. Not for longer than a minute or so each time. With eyes closed, repeat today's idea to yourself. Then open your eyes and look about you, saying, I am looking at a meaningless world. Repeat this statement to yourself As you look around, then close your eyes and conclude with a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I am competition with God. I think the ego believes it is in competition with God. When we recognize that, competition ends. It becomes easier. We surrender. We recognize we're still going to be dealing with the world through the lens of the ego, but as we recognize it, now we have the only true choice that we have. Keep listening to the ego, or turn our attention, our awareness back to awareness itself, which is God. That is lesson 13, my friends. Stay tuned tomorrow. It just keeps getting better. Namaste.